So I make the point, no longer is taxation as big a hook as it used to be. When I say hook, as an estate planner, and I think it filters into the world of a development person too, I think having a hook, as I call it, to bring a person to the table to start talking and start planning their resources is important. They need to have some motivation, and oftentimes taxation, if there's a big tax bill, that can be a good hook. And so, again, death taxes are not a big issue. Income taxes, however, remain a big issue, and that's where those giving retirement plan assets is tremendously important. So, moving now through the simplest, wow, that was an interesting weave onto the palette there. So I think as everybody understands, the simple bequest, which can be either a specific sum of money or a percentage of an estate, it's real easy to think about. It was easy for my guy who gave $5,000 to the University of Chicago to think in terms, rather than that percentage of his $5 million estate. Simple and understandable for the donor and for us. So I think enough said. I think everybody probably understands what a bequest is. It's just in a will or in a trust, it's a specific sum of money or a percentage of whatever is left when the person dies that becomes the bequest to the charitable organization. Now we're back to retirement plans. So we talked about retirement plans in a lifetime setting. Now we're going to talk about them at death. Because just like when a person gives IRA dollars, 401k dollars while they're living, and it avoids taxation, if the person who dies gives those IRA or 401k dollars to a non-charitable organization, they're going to pay tax on those dollars. I like to say somebody someday is going to pay tax on retirement plan dollars. So again, I say they're natural to consider going to a charitable organization that is not taxed on those dollars. Yeah, Pam.
TIAA-CREF is a retirement plan. And it can be a percentage of what's left. And that's something you should all be encouraging all your donors to do, a percentage of what's left after their lifetime uses. It's the coolest idea ever.
Yeah, thank you, because, to you or me, TIAA-CREF is, we know it's a retirement plan, but it may not be commonly understood, yeah. And that's the 800-pound gorilla in Bloomington, Indiana, okay?
Right. And it's multiple taxes. It's not one, it's not two, it's a panoply. Growing, growing, growing. So it's the most heavily taxed thing you could ever leave anybody is retirement plans.
Okay, as I said, generally the first asset to consider in charitable instincts. So now we're going to move fairly quickly through some more complex things and a general topic of charitable remainder trusts. I assume this is a concept that's pretty familiar to most of you or many of you. Let's just kind of go through it basically. So a charitable remainder trust actually is another one of those that can be a lifetime. It can be established during lifetime, but also can be established at death. We call it a type of split interest trust. In other words, it's part charitable and part non-charitable. There's the interest in the trust, the beneficial interest in the trust is part charity and part non-charity. The way they typically work is there's a payment to the non-charity, to the person, and oftentimes it's the person having set it up, or maybe it's the person and their spouse, for their lifetime or a term of years. And then, after the income is paid out, and generally speaking the person dies, the remainder goes to the charity. So it gets a little complex at this point. The donor, when they set up a trust, either during lifetime or at death, gets a charitable deduction for the value of what they just put in the trust. But what did they just put in the trust is the real question. Let's just use an example. They fund a charitable remainder trust with $500,000, and they take a payment at the rate of $5,000 a year, that example probably, out of the trust. That's their interest in the trust. And then someday when they die, the remainder goes to the charitable organization. So what really becomes, for deduction purposes, what really becomes the question is, what is the value of that $5,000 a year for however many of the years they're going to live? Thank you, Jim. And you may say, well, how old are they? Therefore, what are the likelihoods as far as how long they're going to live? And that's a factor. So basically, this is where we often have jokes about actuaries and CPAs as being among the nerdiest people in the world. This is where actuaries actually become handy, because it's an actuarial calculation that says how much that stream of income is going to be worth and how much of a charitable deduction they're going to get. This would have been a good place to have an example, but I didn't think to do that. Pam may have an example for you.
I've got a million examples.
Okay. Why don't you plan to run through one, or you can run through one now, as far as I'm concerned.
Charitable remainder trust. I love the way Scott's talked about funded during lifetime or death. And the perfect example is my stepmom. My dad bought a side yard at beautiful Lake Wawasee and some other property. He bought it a long time ago, and now it's appreciated greatly. My dad's passed away. My stepmother is handicapped. And now I have to sell that land to support stepmom with 24/7 care. I have a huge capital gain bill. My capital gain is federal plus Indiana. I'm going to lose a whole slice. I could, when I sell the first piece of that property, I could deed a fractional interest of that house into a charitable remainder trust, and the terms of the trust would say income to my stepmom for life at 5% always. And there's a trust that grows over the market, so the Dow's going up. Thank you, President Obama. The Dow's going up, so, excuse me. So that means my 5% could be more as my stepmother lives for 30 years with a terrible genetic illness. And I get a partial tax deduction to offset the gain I'm going to pay on the part of the land I just sell, the fractional interest I sell, just have cash for her. So it's a way to offset a big price tag in tax and to have income professionally managed, market driven for life for my poor stepmom. It's a brilliant plan.
Okay, Jim, I get 5 minutes of her time.
Oh, sorry.
All right, so there are two types of charitable remainder trusts. They're called annuity trusts and unit trusts. Let's talk about each one briefly, individually. So the annuity trust is where the payment is expressed in terms of a sum of money. And generally, it's a sum of money for the rest of their life. So, if it's going back to my example, $500,000, perhaps a better, 5% of that, $25,000 a year would be their payments, usually done on a monthly basis, and it stays that same $25,000 year in, year out. As Pam already alluded to, it's got to be at least a 5%. It can be higher. And the advantage is the certainty of income from the donor's vantage point. So let's talk through that. First of all, from the donor's vantage point, they're perhaps satisfying two basic instincts. One is to know that they have enough income to live for the rest of their life. The other is to satisfy their charitable and community instincts by knowing that they're going to leave something to the charitable organization. The other form of charitable remainder trust is what's